Coming at you from the tail end of the AOAP 2026 conference and the beginning of the United States Swim School Conference. So to have our speaker here today is kind of kind of ironic, right? In the topic that we'll be talking about. So without a further ado, Ayana, would you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Dr. Ayana Rakhu. I am a kinesiologist, a movement specialist, an aquatic specialist, and a person who just loves to get people swimming and comfortable with water. My background is, I don't know, quite an interesting story, I guess. Grew up between St. Louis, Missouri, and Minneapolis. If you all know anything about Minneapolis, Minnesota, there's tons of lakes and lots of water. So I actually learned to swim in Minneapolis, spent a lot of time in the lakes, learned to swim around age 6, and just found it to be the most special place. As soon as I was able to go underwater, I was like, oh yeah, underwater is my favorite place. And so from there, I just kept swimming, learning to get better, and did some competitive swimming between ages 6 and 12. And then realized that I just like to play in water more than I like to race people. So switched my competitive sport to basketball, but just continued to be a lifeguard as my first job, teach swim lessons, coach people, and just really got into sharing my love of swimming with other people. And so one thing I did notice growing up is that I tended to be the only girl a lot of times, especially in lifeguarding, and the only Black person, and particularly the only Black girl. So that was something that kind of just I noticed growing up, but never really paid too much attention to until I got right like into my 20s, and really until I got pregnant with my daughter, realized I was having a daughter who would grow up to be a Black woman in society, and I was like, wait a minute, are you going to have friends that swim and do things in water? I swam my entire pregnancy. That was the thing that really called to me. I swam and I roller skated. I didn't tell many people that I roller skated while I was pregnant, but I'm
Yeah.
a really good skater. And so I wasn't worried about it. Had a great time. But swimming and skating were my favorite things to do during my pregnancy. And so I really wanted to share that with my daughter. And so I started to ask my friends if they wanted to go swimming. And they were like, we're not doing that. We're not going swimming. And so I just noticed that Black women, particularly, were not spending a lot of time in the water. At that time, I was finishing or had finished or was in a PhD program and decided to stop that program while I was pregnant and raising my daughter for the first few years. So I was in between things, in between figuring out what I was going to do next. And once my daughter went to kindergarten and I had some more free time, I was like, hey, I could go back and finish my doctorate and really focus on something that I'm really passionate about, which is understanding this disconnect that Black people have with the water. And so my focus academically had been athletic training in undergrad and sports psychology in my master's. I was really focused on the psychology of injury and things like that. But then I switched my focus to behavioral aspects of physical activity. So why people choose the activities they choose. And I really delved into that in my doctorate. And I did a study called Mother, May I Swim? And it was really partly around my pregnancy experience and wanting my daughter to be able to say, hey, mom, can we go to the pool? And my answer being yes for her. So Mother, May I Swim was a grounded theory study, which means my goal was to come out with a theory that would reconnect Black people specifically to the water. And so I did that in a qualitative way, which I think is really important when you're answering a question that hasn't been asked. So instead of doing a lot of quantitative data, we collected a lot of information from mothers and people who were swimmers, non-swimmers, somewhere in the middle, and tried to come up with what is missing and what's a process that we can do to reconnect. And so through that data and research, I came up with the swim efficacy reclamation model. And it is exactly what it sounds like. Swim efficacy is the idea of being confident and comfortable in the water, and then to reclaim that space in the water that we kind of have a disconnect to. And so that model has since been used in several ways for organizations and individuals to as an undergirding or a foundation of how we reconnect to the water. So that's kind of been the work I've been doing since getting my doctorate in 2022. I started a company called Sankofa Swim International. And in that company, we design aquatic programs for organizations, and we work a lot with athletes, triathletes, and all different kinds of athletes, and bring them to the water in a way that helps them connect with their body. So that's really the kinesiology piece, having a mind-body connection. So connect with the water, connect with themselves, and then just become more competent and confident swimmers and people in the water. So,
Yeah.
been up to.
I didn't realize you had your PhD.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, somehow that slipped me. So very, very impressive.
Yeah, my nickname is Doc Rock. So
Doc Rock. I like that.
that's
I
what they
like
call
that.
me.
So a couple of questions, right? And for background, I hail originally, I'm in Tennessee now, but I hail originally from South Mississippi, right?
Yeah.
One of the highest Black populations in the country, in that Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama area. And, I've seen the struggles in the Black community on access to water, right? And learning to swim, right? Um, but I'm a white guy, you know, I'm a white male. My observations aren't necessarily going to be reflective of what's actually going on in the Black community, right? So you've been working in this, specifically. What are some of the issues that, maybe as we as an industry teaching, swim instruction industry, right? What are some issues that maybe we're missing, right?
Good question. And that was a lot of conversation that I had with those mothers in that study. And then since then, it's a lot of my conversation. So part of it is there is a lot of like tension, I would say. I don't always like to use the word trauma, but tension around the relationship with water. And really it is a relationship. And I think that's the first piece that we kind of underestimate when we're in this industry, and we think of it as, swim lessons, swim school, we're teaching something. But really, this is a relationship. So the way I kind of go about even, having lessons, I call them sessions, because when you think about therapy, you go to a therapy session, you don't go to a lesson, right? And that just softens the way we even approach what we're doing in the water. So first, it's that it's the approach being about helping a person developing a relationship. I think the industry needs to recognize that that's really important, especially when you're dealing with different cultures. So that's one. And in doing that, one of the first things or the really important things we need to do is listen. And I think that is a part that is missed a lot as well. We try to get right into, let's learn the skills. Let's figure out how to get you to back float and move forward and all the things. And what a lot of the mothers specifically, and just women, and I focus a lot on what women have to say, because in African culture and in Black culture, a lot of times the women are the first teachers and bringers of children to activities, right? So, and we have a little bit of insight and intuitive nature. And so I kind of really want to listen to the women and the mothers. And what they're saying is, let me tell you how I'm feeling first before we get to the water. And this is not just for people who are afraid. This is for longtime swimmers. This is for competitive swimmers. We've got things that we're holding, right? And so before we even get to the water, let's talk about those things. So I think that's something that the industry can kind of take from this. So a lot of my work is around reflecting. We do some talking, and I ask questions like, what's your relationship with the water? When's the last time you've been in water? What kind of water do you like to be in? You like showers and baths? You like lakes and rivers and oceans? And just kind of get that comfortability, and bringing that vulnerability to the space is always a good way to enter the water, right? Water is already a conductor, and it brings up whatever we're feeling. So I don't know if you've noticed this before, but kind of when you're in the water, and if you're a coach or anything, you can tell when your swimmer tenses up, or you can almost feel the vibrations in the water change. So if we're aware of that, we want to bring to the space a level of vulnerability. So I think when you're working with people of color and of other cultures, it's really important to do those things, to listen, and to bring that vulnerability.
I think that's one thing I really love about what you do is you approach it from a psychological standpoint first, right? And I think, even stepping out of specifically the African American community, Black community, that's a larger thing that many of us miss. So I think there's applications much wider than that. But what are, shifting back to teaching, Black and African Americans to swim, right? What are some of those psychological things that you're seeing that in your sessions? And I love that concept, by the way, right? What are some of the psychological aspects that you most commonly see that have to be overcome even before stepping in the water?
Yeah. Well, one of the main ones is fear. And I think it's really interesting because it goes across beyond swimming. So one of the things I see is you're going to bring to the water whoever you are, whatever you're dealing with. Oh, I'm a little bit controlling. Okay, that's going to come up. I'm the type of person that is a risk taker, or I'm not a risk taker. I'm a little more reserved. So all of those things about the person that you are, you're bringing that to the water. So I definitely noticed that, and I start to try to help a person notice that as well. And a lot of times they'll giggle or laugh and say, "Yeah, I'm a bit of controlling, so this back float's going to be a little tough because I don't want to let go of control, things like that." So I definitely noticed personality things, and so fear is a big deal. And I think once a person can start to conquer fear in the water, you start to see it across the board. So they'll say things like, "Oh, I've done 5 or 6 sessions with you, and now I'm feeling really confident. I'm going to take this class at a college that I didn't think I could do, or I'm going to try skiing now because, so you can start to see just that piece of fear in themselves start to dissipate, or them to have more confidence across the board.
You're seeing that in what
Oh,
you do?
so quickly. It's amazing how much the water it's like the ultimate challenge. It's like if I can do this, I can do anything. And so and you see it so quickly. And I think but partly it's because how vulnerable we get in the water. There's a lot of tears sometimes, there's laughing, there's joking. You just get to bring so much of yourself in the way that I approach this. So I think that's the fear is a big one. And we know that we kind of have heard like, oh, there's trauma and there's generational trauma and things like that. And you do hear a lot of stories where people say, I witnessed someone drowning, a friend of mine or a cousin or anything like that. They had a drowning experience, or I personally did. Or the one you hear most commonly is my parents didn't let me swim, or they didn't know how to swim. So
Yeah.
those are big ones. And sometimes parents who didn't know how to swim made sure their kids knew how to swim, but still there's that deep-seated fear of, well, why didn't you do this? Right? Like, you put me in the water, but why didn't you do this? So we definitely get that. Another one that's outside of the box a little bit is body image. And we lump hair into that one a little bit, but in communities of color, hair, skin, that's a big thing. And I mean, I think for anybody that swam for any amount of time is like, oh, this stuff is tearing apart my hair, my skin, but because of the emphasis that we as a culture put on those things, and the amount of money that we spend on hair and those kind of things, it's a big deal. So a lot of people will say that's been the thing that's held me back. And people want to know from me, what can I do to mitigate that? Is there a cap I can wear? Should I put something on my hair, product, before I get in the water? What should I do with my skin after the water? So I think those are big concerns. And then just how a person feels in their body. Here's a real vulnerable one. A real truth is that Black women over the years have been increasingly sexualized. And so that is a real thing, is going to a pool, being in a space where you are very vulnerable, feeling like the need to cover up, or not having a swimsuit that fits properly, or, finding where can my curves fit into this swimsuit. So, I mean, those are big deals. And I think things that sometimes are overlooked, especially if that's not something that another culture deals with. Right. So if you got to be aware of those things, I would say.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. I never have even thought about the swimsuit issue, because when you look at specifically female swimsuits and even males to a lesser degree, I mean, they're all built for a certain body type, and if you look around at, Black women, African American women, they're typically not the waif, super thin, white girl image. So some of these suits, they're just not going to fit.
Mm-hmm. And you're gonna feel like, well, am I wrong? Like, is it me, or maybe this isn't meant for me? And you know what? But funny thing, we think of women with this, but men, dads, especially, are some of the worst in terms of,
Yeah.
and I mean worse in terms of they deal with this the worst. I don't want my belly to show. Do you have a long sleeve shirt, or can I wear a t-shirt, or do I have to wear trunks? I don't like the way that feels. So, I mean, you get a lot of that with
Yeah.
men learning to swim as well. So,
Wow. That blew my mind. I've never thought about that. So if anybody watching this has any influence with any of the swimsuit manufacturers, uh, please, for all that is holy, start figuring out a way to solve this issue for African American women, because that's an easy barrier to overcome.
for sure. Yeah.
That
And
is so easy.
I work with a lot of Somali women and Muslim women who
Mm-hmm.
want to wear their full garb while they're swimming, and which is perfectly okay. So that's another thing, is like, is pool rules, what is acceptable swimwear. We need to
Yeah.
start to just be aware of the flexibility that's needed there, right? Like, so they like to maybe wear their hijabs and their full garb, their long pants in the water, and that's okay. Our chlorine and our little, our filtration systems are going to be okay.
Yep.
We're going to be just fine. So just being conscious of that is really important.
That is not our big, I'd be much more worried just about the weight aspect of it and restricting movement than I
Mhm.
would be about any contamination burden that will cause.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
really true. And it's funny that you say that, because when I'm doing lessons specifically with those groups, and a lot of times they are women only, or they like to be separate
Yeah.
from men, I will talk to them about the extra movements they need to make because they're wearing so many clothes, or like what your freestyle is going to look like, what your movements are going to look like based on that. So that's a really important thing for them to know as well.
Yeah. So I want to pick your brain for a minute, and we can tie this into maybe some myth busting, right? But you're a doctorate in one of your doctorates, amazingly enough, is in exercise science, right? So that means you're very well versed in human physiology and human movement, right? So what what or is there any difference in teaching African Americans over regular old white people, right? For lack of a better word, or Asians or Filipinos or other BIPOC individuals, right? What physiological differences are there, if any, in
Yeah. Oh,
teaching African Americans to others?
let's bust this myth.
Let's do it.
you
Let's do it.
know, Physiologically, nothing, right? Human body is human body. However, there is a conversation that needs to be had. And so that's the thing that is the difference. What I try to say, so one thing we do in my sessions is find your float, right? We don't say we're going to learn to float. We say we're going to find your float, because every human body floats differently and has different levels of buoyancy. When you think about it in exercise physiology terminology, it's where is your center of mass or your center of buoyancy, right? So I like to start to tell people that be aware of your body. Okay, so for me personally, my legs are big and heavy. I'm an athlete. I'm very muscular. My legs sink every time.
Yep.
Okay, if I don't try, if I just lay there and am totally relaxed, my legs are going to sink. But I have a lot of buoyancy in my chest and belly area, so my top half will float. Well, then my float is that it is a legs hang and top half is up. If I want to be completely relaxed, that is my float, and that float is perfectly fine. And so I have to learn to be really comfortable with that float. Now, there are things I can do to get my legs to rise, and I can move a little, but that creates a little tension in my body. And that's also a way to be above the water, but it's not my full float. So that's the main thing I do is I talk, especially, and sometimes it's a male, female thing. Women with our breasts and our butt and our arms, that's where our float is. That's where our buoyancy is. Whereas men may have more density in certain areas. And so I talk to men a lot because a lot of them will say, I just don't float. I sink like a rock. And
Yeah.
it's like, well, one thing that everybody has going for them is everybody's head floats. Every head floats. So if you have nothing else, if you tilt your head back far enough, your head will float. The rest of your body will be completely vertical, but your head and face will be out of the water. And that's the point
Yeah.
of a float. So I do a lot of talking about that. Yeah, more than anything. But there's no like, culture that has a I can't do this or I can do this because of my culture, race, or ethnicity.
Yeah. And I think that's a good tip, not only for teaching, individuals of color or different ethnicities, that's a good tip for everybody. Because all too often, for those really fundamental skills, right? I'm not talking about transitioning into freestyle where, yeah, you have to be prone in the water, right? But those fundamental life saving skills, it doesn't have to look like a traditional back float, right? Where the stomach's up and the ears are back and everything's kind of flat, right? It can truly be find your float. I love that.
Yeah,
It's another thing I wish agencies would include, right? Um,
sure.
I want to give you just a few minutes, right? And I'm going to ask you a big question in a minute, right? But before that, what's the three biggest myths that you want to just bust right now when it comes to teaching African Americans how to swim?
One is that it was not ours, right? Like this is a thing that white people do. That is not true. Historically, Black people, people of African descent, have always been the best swimmers, boaters, divers, surfers, fishers, boat builders. All of those
Yeah,
things were always things of African descent. And actually, for a very long time, particularly between the 14 and 1600s, people of white and European descent were not swimming.
yeah,
For religious reasons, for cultural reasons of their own, were not swimming, and we were actually kind of the example of here's what it looks like, here's how we do it. So there's a lot of a historical record of, especially as the Portuguese began to ship Africans over to other countries, we're noticing, oh, these people swim. That's a new thing, and how they are in the water is very new to us, right? So that's one thing, that swimming has always been an African and Black thing. Another thing would be the body type thing. I can't swim because I am of this culture or because of my body type or body weight. That definitely, we got to get rid of that, especially for young kids, because they're already starting to pick up on that, and it becomes a body image issue. Um, and then that you can get over your fear, that fear doesn't have to be paralyzing, and that you can go from being afraid to the complete other end of really enjoying the depths of what water brings, to snorkeling, to deep sea diving, to all the things. You can go from being afraid to that at any age.
yeah. It's a lot to unpack, and I think about what you said. If you go back and look at even today, in the Caribbean, where you see people of color, they're like free diving, and it's crazy what they're doing, right? Uh, and you think about going back to the cradle of life in Africa. You know, fishing didn't start in Germany. Fishing had to start somewhere, right? And most people, don't even realize that the single largest invention or advancement in swimming comes from Australia, from the Aboriginal peoples.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 1900s, we were swimming the trudgeon, right? And nobody knows what the trudgeon is anymore
I
because a
know the
guy went to
trend. Yeah.
Australia and he saw the Aboriginal people there, right, which were people of color swimming in what we now know as freestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought it to the Olympics in the early 1900s, and
Exactly.
it fundamentally changed the entirety of swimming.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I want to give you a chance to shine. Right, there's a lot of voices in that speak to the advancement of swimming in the Black community. Right, some have presented here, some presented in the past. Right, there's a lot of voices out there. Big question, right? Where, and I'm assuming you're familiar with most of them. You may not be, I don't know. But what is something that sets your approach apart from theirs?
Mm.
Or
Good.
is there?
Yeah. One, I would say that sometimes we feel very siloed in that we think we're the only one doing the work we're doing. And so, what I've learned over the course of the years of doing this work is that there are, as you said, a lot of people doing very similar work. And we are all working for the same goal, which is
Yeah.
to have more competent and confident people in all communities in and around water. right? That's the goal, that we have less drownings and more people confident in water. So in that way, in a very overarching and conceptual way, we're all doing the same work. I would say what sets me apart is really, and it's a kind of a quiet thing, but it's really the kinesiology piece. It is really my deep understanding of the human body and how it moves and what it takes to connect the mind to the body. So a lot of people will say, I've taken your program and I learned to swim in 3 sessions and I can't believe it. I've been trying this all my life, or it's happened so quickly for me. And I really think the secret is I put together 8 steps of how we teach our lessons, like the skills we teach, and they are in an order that just makes such sense to the body. And it is very kinesthetically pleasing, is what I say, so that the body can remember the steps in a way that a lot of times we just haven't put them together that way. And it's interesting, you mentioned the trudgeon and how it became the freestyle. It's the intuitive nature that people of color tend to have or have had in the past with water. It's all about how we move through the water and just that intuitive piece. It's not a learned so much as it is a feeling, right? And so what I teach is how to feel, how your body feels in the water and how to feel that. And so I've provided some steps that do that, but I really think just, yeah. And especially when I work one-on-one with folks, I just notice things that other people don't notice. I'm seeing what's happening with your hips. I'm looking at your knees. I'm looking at your ankles. I'm looking at all the things. And I think I just attest that to all the education I've had in those areas.
Yeah.
And I'm glad, because it's taken me a lot of time. It's taken up a lot of my life to learn all these things. So I'm glad that it's useful for something.
Well, I mean, I'm just, on behalf of peoples everywhere, thank you for the work that you're doing. This is something that definitely needs more awareness, right? We don't put enough awareness on this. As much as we do with the drowning prevention agencies, whether it's the Red Cross or NDPA, all doing really good work as a community in this nation, we do not emphasize this enough. So thank you for the work that you do, as well as others, to advance this and try to advance swimming in the African American community. So last thing, right? If someone wants to know more about what you do and how you do it in your approach, right, where can they find that?
Yeah, sure. Check out my website. That's one place, www.sankofaswim.com. Sankofa, the word Sankofa. That is an African Ghanaian word that means to go back and get. It means to go back to your culture, to your people, understand what they were doing, and bring it forward in a way that makes sense today. So it's called sankofaswim.com. So that's where you can find out about the approach and kind of just the events and things that we're doing. Also, social media. I'm a little lagging on there, but I'm there. And that's more about me, the person, and the practitioner. So you can find me there at doc_RA_KHU, Doc Rakhu.
Awesome. Awesome. Doc Rock, I'm going to love that. That's your name from now on. All right. Doc Rock, thank you so much for carving some time out here today. I know you're busy. Pleasure always to have you around. So again, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Folks, yeah, awesome. So folks, make sure you check out Doc Rock at Sankfo Swim.
Sankofa.
Sankofa Swim, right? Make sure you check it out. And also, while you're doing it, check out our resources. Go to CMAHC LinkedIn, go to our website, and look at our other unfiltered segments, as well as our webinars that we have recorded. So, Doc Rock, thanks again so much for being here. I look forward to seeing your work over the years to come, and your voice growing and becoming amplified, and many, many successes to come.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Doc.